welcome. Today is January 6, 2020. This is Workhorse Drums. I am Chris Hamilton. Today I want to talk about the top 5 grossing tours of all time. The reason is because it's starting to become concert season again. I know there's concerts that go on all year, but it seems to be they take a break in December and January, and then they start to come on strong again in February and especially in March when there's more places that are warm outside and there's starting to be more festivals. Anybody get excited before concerts, or some people are like, yeah, I really want to listen to this band. I like their show. I like their songs, but, you know, I hate dealing with 30 million people trying to get into this one compact space.
Oh, I love it.
Or are you just totally jazzed about it? You're going to have a few beers. You're going to go in there. You're going to get your mind blown. You're going to hear stuff and see stuff that's just incredible, and it gets you pumped up, and it's just a great night. For me, I'm somewhere in between. Sometimes I get really excited, but the crowds usually do wear me out. It's hard to fit that many people in one location with all the traffic and everything else that's going on, and for it to run smoothly.
And it's $40 party.
Now, nevertheless, though, I always have a good time. Anyways, let's get started. Surprisingly, the top grossing artist, I'm actually going to start off with the top. I'm not going to go backwards. The top grossing artist of all time is Ed Sheeran. As you can see here, it looks like he has a pretty big screen. Looks like he had a big show. It says that he played from 2017 to 2019 on his Plus tour or Division tour. I'm not sure what that is. I'm obviously not a huge Ed Sheeran fan. Got nothing against the guy, though. But he played to 8,796,000 people. So almost 9 million people. Think about that. That's the size of a state in America. A small state, but still, that's huge. That's from 255 shows, and he grossed $775 billion. I mean, $1 million. I feel like Dr. Evil there for a second. 775 million. That's one tour. Almost $1 billion. Can you imagine that? I mean, the number's so ludicrous, it's hard for me to even think that it's $775 million
for Jeff Bezos
for 2 years or for a year and a half, whatever it was, of touring. And it's just one guy. It's not even a full band. So, and his average gross per show was $3 million. So he made $3 million per show. So every show, 255 times over, he was going to make $3 million. Now, I know he has to pay people, but still, you got to be pretty psyched when everyone's coming to see you and you know you're going to walk away with $3 million after every single show.
His bed is made out of dollar bills.
That's pretty good. Now, just a quick fact about Ed Sheeran, which I did not know, but he's a young guy. I knew that, but he's actually tied for 5th in the UK for the most number 1 hits. He's had 8 number 1 hits. Think about that. To be that young, to have grossed that much money in one tour, and you've got all these hits. I mean, obviously that's why people turn out for him. But that's just amazing. I mean, I don't even think the guy's 30 yet. He's already hitting almost $1 billion on his last tour, and he has 8 number 1 singles. Wow. Number 2 is U2, tied for my favorite band, them and AC/DC. U2 has grossed $736 million on their U2 360 tour, which was from 2009 to 2011. So again, another 2-year tour, but theirs is actually only 110 shows. So they racked up almost the same as Ed Sheeran, and not in less than half the shows. They played to 7 million people, over 7 million, and their average gross per show is 6.7. So they almost made $7 million per show. Holy crap. $7 million per show? And it's saying, Wikipedia says that adjusted for inflation, they would actually still be higher than Ed Sheeran. They'd be at 836 million. So they did a tour for 2 years, but only played 110 shows and managed to do $736 million worth of sales and made almost $7 million a show.
Yeah, you guys paid for it.
That's crazy. I actually just watched the U2 Experience. It's their latest special they have from the last tour they did called the Experience and Innocence Tour. They had another tour that was previous to that was like they have 2 albums and they go together. The first album was called their Innocence album, Songs of Innocence. And it was called the Innocence and Experience Tour. And then this was they just released the Experience album 2 years ago, and they played the Experience and Innocence. So they just flipped it around. I thought it was pretty good, but Bono did get into some of today's politics, and he kind of talked about, and they had videos too of it to back it up, of him speaking about how we should be more accepting of the refugee crisis, and he was hoping that just the countries, the European countries, would be more accepting and basically just help those that are in need. And I don't know, but for whatever reason I got curious because I thought, well, I wonder what Bono's house looks like.
Oh, it's...
And so then the first picture that comes up is this. And then this is his house apparently in Ireland. And I thought, well, if he just made $736 million off that tour, and he's had 2 or 3 tours since, he's probably got to have another house somewhere. So then I looked up, and he's got a house in France, the south of France.
Yeah,
and then this picture came up. Now,
that is nice.
I'm not sure, but those look like some big old walls.
Big ass walls.
So I thought that was kind of funny. He's open borders and let all the refugees in, but let me put up these humongous walls and no one's getting in my yard.
Get off my lawn.
And I mean, the guy's worth like $400 million. I mean, how many people would that help? Probably more than that based off how much money he's making just off touring. But you would think that you'd be having setting people up with all kinds of shelters and stuff. And maybe he does, I don't know. But it's just like, how much money do you need if that many people are in need of just the basic human necessities?
We all got bills to pay.
I don't know. Anyways, let's go to number 3. Guns N' Roses. Guns N' Roses grossed 563 million people from their Not in This Lifetime tour, which is, they said basically they got their the old band back together. Basically, there's not all of them, but most of them. And it's made 563 million so far, but they've been touring this Not in This Lifetime tour since 2016, and they're still touring it. They're going to be touring it even more in 2020. I don't know how many dates, but I know they've already got some festivals lined up. And they're walking away from each show, it says here, making almost $4 million per show. So that's pretty good. On a quick side note, just to let everyone know who those members of the original crew that are back together, there's only really 3. So originally, the drummer was Steven Adler for the first album. Then I think he got into some drug problems, and they replaced him with Matt Sorum, and he played on the Use Your Illusion albums 1 and 2. Their bassist was Duff McKagan. The guitarist was Slash at lead guitar, and then Izzy at rhythm guitar. And then they had, of course, Axl on vocals. And I believe they had a keyboardist, but I'm not sure who it was. The returning members are just Duff at bass, Slash at lead guitar, and then Axl, of course, he's always just been Guns N' Roses. He's continued to tour with the name. I read that Izzy had turned it down and that Steven Adler actually got to play a few shows, but that was it. I think he played a few shows in South America. Number 4 is Roger Waters. I'm sorry, that's wrong. Number 4 is actually the Rolling Stones, as you can see here in this picture of Mick Jagger. And this was the Bigger Bang Tour from 2005 to 2007. They made $558 million off that tour, which adjusted for inflation, it comes in almost $700 million. So they would actually be at number 3 if they adjusted it for inflation. They played to an audience of almost 5 million people. And again, the tours from 2005 to 2007, they played about 150 shows, and they were making almost $4 million per show. Now, you got to remember, even at 2005, 2007, these guys are right around 60 years old. So that is pretty impressive. I mean, to go out there and still have that kind of draw, which I know they always have.
They can still
They've always
sign.
been able to play stadiums and arenas no matter what album they released and how good the album did. It didn't really seem to matter. They would get people to come in.
When was their last?
Want to watch them. Number 5 is Coldplay, and I really wish I would have seen this tour. Now, this tour grossed almost $520 million. They played 114 shows. The tour was just from 2016 to 2017. So that's a decent amount of shows in just maybe a year and a half. And they grossed almost over $4.5 million per show. So they did really well. Just per show was, I mean, it's pretty incredible when, if you think, even as a band, you know, and I think they're a 4-piece band, making $4.5 million per, I mean, just, you know, for us normal folks, you think about it and you go $4.5 million for going and playing a gig. You're going to go and play it. And I know it's a huge place. They're playing stadiums and stuff. And again, the tour looked amazing. I really wish after I'd seen it come out that I hadn't skipped it. But yeah, they're making just $4.5 million. Just going to go to a show, play for a couple hours, maybe even warm up. Maybe you're there for 6 hours. Maybe you do your sound check, and then you go and you take a break for a little while. And you got to wait around. The audience fills in. I don't know if they had an opening act or what. And then they come out and then they play for like 2 hours and walk away, and they're $4.5 million richer. Now I'm down for that. That sounds good to me. Number 6 is Roger Waters from Pink Floyd. Again, it's just Roger Waters. And the reason I'm saying from Pink Floyd is obviously that's what that's the group he played in, but he toured The Wall live. So he toured the album.
He drove
and
his van
he made this
outer space.
This tour was 3 to 4 years long, 2010 to 2013, and he pulled in $458 million. Him just playing The Wall live. He played 219 shows, which is pretty good, even though it was 3 to 4 years long, and averaged $2 million per gig. That's how much he was making per show. And if you think about that, that's amazing, because Roger Waters really hasn't been, on his solo career, he didn't really have a huge solo career. I think maybe he's been a little bit more popular in the UK, but just in general, he took that tour everywhere, and there's such a demand, and there still is to this day, just to see Pink Floyd music live. It's played, you know, a lot of symphonies, or like cities will have whatever, if they have a symphony or whatever their music department is,
Symphonies.
They'll play gigs, and they always seem to do a Pink Floyd album, or just Pink Floyd songs, and a laser show, and it always attracts maybe like the biggest audience that we have for those types of symphony shows, laser shows. All right. Number 7 is AC/DC's Black Ice World Tour. As you can see, it looked pretty cool. Looks like a typical AC/DC show. What you can really see, I guess, in that picture. They grossed $441 million. They played from 2008 to 2010, 167 shows. That's a pretty good number. It's not huge, but it's not light either. They played to almost 5 million people, and they averaged about $2.5 million per show. Always thought it was cool because AC/DC is one of those bands that can always, it's like the Rolling Stones. No matter how good their album does, people will always fill a stadium or an arena to go and see them. It's just they always have that pull. And their ticket prices, they've never been outrageous. I mean, they may have like a few seats or VIP seats, but you know, some of those guys, like I know those Stones have charged some really high ticket prices, and at least what I think is high. And some of the other guys, and U2 has done the same. But AC/DC, for the most part, usually tries to make it affordable so people can come out, and they always put on a great show. I even saw them, like I said, on the last tour, the Rock or Bust tour, and I had the pleasure of seeing Brian Johnson right before he could no longer play with them, and they sounded great. So I'm glad I got to see Brian Johnson, because I wouldn't have wanted to see Axl Rose with AC/DC. That's just not AC/DC to me.
I don't think so.
Coming in at number 8 is Metallica with the World Wired tour. Still going on. They've played 139 dates so far. They started it in 2016, and they've grossed $416 million so far. I didn't get to see them. I actually was going to go, but the ticket prices were just too high for me for what was available.
Astronomically high.
I'm not a big enough Metallica fan to pay those prices, but maybe in the future, I'd love to see Metallica. I've never seen them. Big fan. I love the latest album too. I thought it was great. They've already played to over 4 million people, and they gross about $3 million per show. That's pretty. I mean, what I think is cool too is that, you know, when you're going into like another country and it's beautiful and you get to explore it, and then your job is you got to go and play in front of all these people and make $3 million. I mean, that just sounds like an amazing life. But I think it's so cool, and they're still going. They're going to play some festivals this year. If you haven't heard, check it out, because there might be some seats available, and you could see them. I think they're playing like 5 different festivals this year. Coming in at number 9 is the Rolling Stones again. This was the No Filter tour, their most recent one, 2017 to 2019. They only played 45 shows, and they made $415 million. They made almost $10 million a show. $10 million a show. And they did play stadiums. Their average stadium size was about 52,000 people, but still almost $10 million a show. I mean, that just changes. Just think, I mean, if, you know, you could divide that up 4 ways and you're still coming out with, you know, over $2 million per gig, per band member. You got Charlie Watts on drums, Keith Richards on guitar, Mick Jagger on vocals, and then Ronnie Wood on guitar as well. And I know they have studio musicians or touring musicians that play the bass and keyboards, and they got some backup singers, but the bulk of that, I'm sure, is going towards those guys. I mean, that's incredible. And then number 10 is Madonna. She played the Sticky and Sweet tour from 2008 to 2009. She only played 85 shows and racked up over $400 million. Adjusted for inflation, it's almost $500 million. She averaged almost $5 million a show, just herself. I'm not a big Madonna fan, but that's super impressive, especially for somebody that's, I think she hasn't had a big album since maybe 2000. And this is almost 10 years after that. And she's still attracting that many people willing to pay those prices. And it says their average attendance per concert was 41,000 people. Well, that's really impressive. Well, let me know about whatever concert you guys plan to see this year. Maybe somebody's touring that I don't know and would like to see. I know some of the 70s and 80s bands are getting back together, or they're going on tour, and it's been pretty cool to hear about, but maybe there's somebody that I missed, or just let me know in general. I'm always interested to see what people are pretty excited to see, who they're excited to see, and where they're going to see them. Let me know what you guys think about the list, too. Is this what you would have guessed? I wouldn't have guessed some of the guys. I wouldn't have ever guessed Ed Sheeran. I know he's super popular now. He's sold lots of records. I think he actually has the most played song on the internet. But I wouldn't have thought he had the number one tour, highest grossing tour. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Until I talk to you again next time, I hope you guys have a good day, a good night. Take care of each other. Take it easy. All right, bye.